what do you mean that I don't have to work my entire life and retire when someone else says that I have to retire? What do you mean? And so for me, that was really, really eye-opening because I was still very young. I might have still even been in school or like not completely finished with my journey. And so for me, that was very eye-opening and just kind of sparked something in me of, I want to learn more about this. How does this work? And then at that time, I didn't personally know anyone else who was on a FI or a FIRE journey. So it was me and lots of books, right?
Okay.
Like the traditional books like Simple Path to Wealth, Your Life or Your Money, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, like all of those. And I vividly remember that summer where I just got all of these financial books. And like that's what I did that summer was I just really went out into the sun, took my book, and I was just reading and reading and devouring all this information. And then I also turned to podcasts too, and that's
Mhm.
where I just really started to see, okay, there are people who are doing this. There's people from all walks of life and backgrounds and probably more debt and financial issues than me who are doing this and doing it successfully. So I thought, okay, I'm going to give this a go. Like I'm very, very intrigued.
Everyday people working 9 to 5, saving up that money, trying to survive, investing in the future, trying to be wise. We're gonna be money heroes. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Nick Johnson, host of Everyday Money Heroes, and I've reached early retirement. I'm here to provide information on how to obtain financial independence and inspire you through sharing stories of everyday people who are turning knowledge into freedom.
That hustle, always reaching for the sky. We're gonna be money heroes. Never gonna shy.
Hello and welcome to Everyday Money Heroes. We provide information and inspiration to people of all ages to take control of their financial journey. I'm your host, Nick Johnson, and today we have Dr. Leah Kaylor with us. Before we get into our discussion with Dr. Kaylor, uh, a brief reminder that if you have not, that you would subscribe to the channel if you're watching us on YouTube. Also, that you would follow Everyday Money Heroes on your platform of choice if you are listening to this by way of podcast. So now back to Dr. Leah Kaylor. Dr. Leah Kaylor is a licensed psychologist, trauma specialist, and the FBI's leading expert on sleep and performance. She is the author of If Sleep Were a Drug. She's been featured in Time, Forbes, Vogue, Men's Fitness, NBC, Newsweek, and Yahoo News. After years of helping first responders and federal agents manage the psychological burden of high stress careers, Dr. Kaylor turned her attention to a different kind of resilience, financial independence. As she is currently navigating her own FI journey, she identified a critical gap in the community. Many high performers facing burnout, feeling trapped by their careers, unaware of the strategic tools available to them. This led her to launch FMLA Help, a platform dedicated to educating professionals on using the Family and Medical Leave Act as a vital recovery tool to protect their mental health and sustain their long-term financial journey. Dr. Kaylor bridges the gap between sleep science, mental health, and financial strategy, proving that it isn't just about the numbers, it's about having the health and autonomy to enjoy it. All right, with that being said, everybody, let's welcome Dr. Leah Kaylor. How you doing, Leah?
Hey, thank you for having me.
All
I
right, it is.
appreciate it. Excited to be here today.
Yes, absolutely. I recently met Leah at Camp FI Southeast. Um, one of the things about I enjoy about Camp FI is that you get a chance to meet people in the community. But unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to do a whole lot of talking to Leah, and it upsets me. Only interaction we really had is that we always have karaoke the last night at Camp FI, and I was doing a little crowd work, and I tried to bring in on the chorus a brown eyed girl. That's all I remember. That's the only. Do you remember that at all, Leah?
I do. I
Oh,
thought you
okay.
were going to say something else about karaoke. That's why I got afraid.
Oh, it must be something I forgot. We might have to have that off. We might have to have that conversation offline. I got you. Well, thank you so much for being here. Now, one thing I did not put in your bio. Is it okay for me to just call you Leah? Because I like to give respect to
Of
education.
course.
Okay, so one thing I omitted is that looks can be deceiving. Apparently you're a pretty tough cookie, Leah. Apparently. Your dad has sold drugs. Well, he sells drugs. Your mom's done time in prison, and you've also been behind bars as well.
Yes, but all in a different context. But yes, that's one way to get attention, indeed.
If you could elaborate on that, please, Leah.
Yeah, so to clarify things, my dad is a pharmaceutical drug representative. My mother is a dental hygienist in a maximum security prison, and I have been behind bars as a psychological trainee, doing internship and shadowing work at a maximum security prison as well.
Yes, I heard you say that. And I was like, whoa, hold on. I was like, okay. I was like, that was pretty funny. So I wanted to make sure to share that here. So
It's an attention getter, that's for sure.
it definitely got my attention. I was like, well, who would have thought it? So with that being said, Leah, we're going to try to um, approach two different kind of topics here because I
Yes.
definitely like to spotlight individuals in the community as far as where they are in their fight journey, but also you are a subject matter expert in a very specific area. So I want to make sure to highlight that and to also bring to the attentions of our audience how individuals can use that as a mechanism as they're on their fight journey as well. So we'll talk about the five piece first, and then we'll try to bridge over. So first of all, got to ask you kind of my kind of standard questions that I ask my guests. Where are you in your fight journey? Are you
I'm in the messy middle.
the messy middle? Okay,
I
I
wish I
got you.
was further along, but I'm in the messy middle, and it definitely feels long, arduous, and messy, is what it feels like. Yes.
Yes, it is definitely appropriately titled The Messy Middle. Well, the good thing about it is that you share with me, and I see that one of the best things you can do to combat that messy middle is to be engaged in the community. And so that you can, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And because you and I are both in Florida,
Mhm.
that there are a lot of events going on. So, yes, we met at Camp FI, but the St. Petersburg, like Tampa area has lots of events going on. I'm actually going to one later this evening. So,
Mhm.
I do think that it's so helpful to be engaged with other members in the community to kind of cheer you on and keep you going whenever you're especially stuck in that messy middle and you're just slogging along.
Yeah, that is true. So, how did you learn about the FI community, Leah?
Yeah, so it's an interesting story. I have a I'm going to tell you the long story.
Okay.
I have an undergraduate degree, a master's degree, a PhD, and then I have a postdoctoral master's degree in clinical psychopharmacology. So needless to say, I have a lot of student loan debt. I
Okay.
have debt that belongs to me that was private. Again, I was the oldest child. So we didn't really have a lot of experience like navigating loans and how to go about that. And so I feel like I had some predatory loan like lenders. I also had federal student aid. I also got like some scholarships, but nonetheless, to have that much education, I certainly do have debt. And so, with that being said, I purchased a course and it was called Dreams Not Debt. And it was all about investing and how to get further along and how, even though you do have a lot of debt, how you can eventually surpass that. And during that course, there was a very small module. It was probably maybe a 10-minute video, maybe about fire and what is it and how does it work and what are the different types of fire, like barista and fat fire and things like that. And I was just like, hold on, let me rewind this and listen again. Like, what do you mean that I don't have to work my entire life and retire when someone else says that I have to retire? What do you mean? And so for me, that was really, really eye-opening because I was still very young. I might have still even been in school or like not completely finished with my journey. And so for me, that was very eye-opening and just kind of sparked something in me of, I want to learn more about this. How does this work? And then at that time, I didn't personally know anyone else who was on a FI or a FIRE journey. So it was me and lots of books, right?
Okay.
Like the traditional books like Simple Path to Wealth, Your Life or Your Money, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, like all of those. And I vividly remember that summer where I just got all of these financial books. And like that's what I did that summer was I just really went out into the sun, took my book, and I was just reading and reading and devouring all this information. And then I also turned to podcasts too, and that's
Mhm.
where I just really started to see, okay, there are people who are doing this. There's people from all walks of life and backgrounds and probably more debt and financial issues than me who are doing this and doing it successfully. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna give this a go. Like I'm very, very intrigued.
I got you. And what year was that that you so you bought this course and there was a small module in there that basically
Yes.
kind of planted the seed. What year was that?
I would guess maybe 2020.
Oh wow, okay. I got you. Okay,
Yeah,
2020.
I think that that's when I had first started to hear like a little bit about it, and I'm like, yeah, what is this? And since then, it has grown and grown and grown to the point of, really directing my goals towards putting money away financially, like really getting a very good understanding of the stock market, and then getting a chance to meet other people in the community who are also on this journey, and whether that's at the very beginning, also in the messy middle, or people who have successfully done it. I think that that has been just so incredibly useful to meet other people who are actually doing this, and this isn't just like a myth.
Yeah, you and I we found out about it around the same time,
Okay.
Leah. I guess I always had the behaviors and I was doing the things, but I just didn't know
Yes.
that's what it was. As far as I was
Okay.
living below my means, I was investing in the stock market and things like that. And in 2020, that's when I found out about it. And it was just almost kind of like a happenstance that I crossed a video on the internet and I heard somebody talk about fire. I was like, I've never heard about that before. And that's when I went down a rabbit hole. And literally, I think I went through and I heard it was Our Rich Journey. And they said
Okay.
something about fire. And I think I Googled their name again. No, I went to my podcast player and I just put fire in and Choose FI came up. And
Yep.
then I was like, okay, well, what's this? And then I started binging on all that. And what happened is one of the episodes we talked about the local meetups. I was like, local meetups. And so I went to the website and it just so happened that they had a group in Jacksonville. And I went and first thing I did, I wanted to be official. So I went and I bought a Choose FI shirt. I still got my
There
shirt. It
you
had like
go.
Choose FI. And I went to
Represent.
it. I was representing and I went there and I did that. And it was definitely it was something that forever have kind of changed the course of my life. And I'm not trying to say that to be kind of sensationalize it, but it really has because just like you said, Leah, I had friends, but I had nobody that was into like finance the way I was. And they were like, oh man, it's boring. And, just like you said, it was mythical until I actually
Mm-hmm.
met people who were like, okay, and I met these people who were in their like late 30s, early 40s, who like, I'm like, what you doing? Hey, I just came back from Bali. I'm like, I was like, well, I just kind of slow traveled around and I was like, man, I was like, I want that. And I was just so fortunate that I had already been doing the things. So when I learned about fire, I was on like 3 or 4 years away from actually hitting my numbers. And so I was thankful.
Amazing.
So I was on the back side of that messy middle. If you are looking for a community of people, like-minded people, that's the most important thing. Definitely go. I suggest going out to choose fi.com/local and find out if there's a local group there in your area. So we have that you're in the messy middle, Leah. You're plugged into the community. You're doing things. And have you shared your aspirations right now to like your family, your friends, saying, "Hey, you know what? I heard about this is the community I'm in. This is what I'm trying to do." And if you've shared, what kind of response have you been getting from them?
So I'm the type of person that when I'm into something, like that's all I want to talk about. Like I'm really excited. I need to tell everyone, like even if I just met you, I need to tell you about whatever it is that I'm into.
Hmm.
And so yes, I can't keep my mouth shut whenever it comes to FI and just being excited about this and working towards it. And so I definitely have shared it with my family, and I think that it's just confusion, and
Hmm.
like understandably so, but like how does this work? How are you going to make that happen? How are you going to make sure that the money doesn't run out? Things like that. And so uh that's why I also think that the local groups and actually being able to connect with people who get it
Hmm.
is so valuable. And that has been those friendships, I feel like just comes so incredibly easy once you do get a chance to go to a FI group or a camp FI or something along those lines, because you're not doing any explaining. They already get it. And so
Yeah.
you're already on this like level of understanding
Hmm.
that that kind of puts you on this like even playing ground. And so I think that some folks that are, yeah, like my friends, my close family, have a hard time understanding, but I think that I would have a hard time continuing to move on this journey and to hit my goals if I didn't have my five friends and my five cheerleaders who do get in and who have already achieved it and are kind of like role models for me, and I look up to them.
Yeah, definitely, Leah. I know myself, I've shared it with people along the way. And I remember when I basically cashed out at my job, I was like, you know what, like I'm out of here. And I remember I was going around, I was telling my coworkers that I was leaving. One of the guys came up to me and he's like, I get it now, man. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, he's like, I get why you used to, bring your lunch to work all those days. He's like, I get that now. And just the things I was doing, I would be talking about investments and stuff like that. And now it's real to him. And what pains me is that this was a friend of mine. And I was like, I wish you would have came along with me when I tried to get you to do it, because now to you it's
Mm-hmm.
real. But now it's like, okay, you could have been into it, you could have 1 year, 2 year, 5 years into it instead
Yeah,
of
you
being
could have
like,
been
okay,
right alongside me.
yeah, and that's what's tough. So yeah, the community is important, and it's always great for me to hear people who have been in it for several years, who have crossed that finish line. Like, yeah, you know what? I'm worth more now than I did when I stopped working. I'm like, that's what I'm talking about. That is the good stuff. So you
Those are
definitely
just incredible stories to hear. It's so much fun, and I'm excited to eventually be among the ranks of those people.
You will, Leah. You are doing all the right things. So, you mentioned that on your five journey, you started a little bit later, as far as as far as the things that you had to do, as far as student loans and all the training. So, for individuals and the self like you, was there particular things that you had to do as far as a mind shift when it came from saying, okay, I started a little bit late. I've done this extended training. I have these advanced degrees. I have a lot of student loan. What did you have to do to really get in the right mindset state to say, hey, you know what, this is still going to work out?
Absolutely. I think it's such a trade-off, and I have to constantly remind myself of that of, yes, Leah, you do have a lot of student loans, but you couldn't do the work that you do
Mm,
without the degree that those student loans paid for. So, I constantly have to come back to that. And I will say too that even though I was the first of the children to go to college, and we probably made some mistakes along the way and maybe didn't always choose the smartest path, because I think that sometimes that's just really challenging, like navigating that and figuring it out. And I think that there certainly are like very predatory student loan
mhm.
companies out there, but nonetheless, I think that, I love hearing about parents who are trying to teach their kids about FI, who are trying to encourage their kids to like take AP credits. And luckily, without even knowing, I had a little bit of AP credits. So
Mhm.
that was useful bringing that in. I did gymnastics in college, so I had some like financial scholarships through that. And also, as I was preparing to do my doctorate, just learning about the other options for repayment. And as we talk about this, not all of my loans are eligible for forgiveness. I have paid tens of thousands of dollars worth of private loans that would never be forgiven in any other context just because of the nature of private loans. But I did luckily was able to be eligible for a lot of federal loans and federal loans that are eligible for public service loan forgiveness, PSLF. And because of my work through the government and also like teaching positions that I take on the side, I am nearly 2 years away from potentially having the rest of my loan balance forgiven.
Hey, clap, clap,
Yes.
clap, clap, clap. All right.
So we're all going to cross our fingers right now that nothing happens with that program, that nothing gets taken away. I, make my monthly loan payments. I'm very diligent about recording that and making sure that my employer continues to sign off on that, and that everything, I'm checking all the boxes for that. But I think that to answer your question, there's this reframe that I always have to do of, Leah, you wouldn't have the job, you wouldn't have the opportunities, you wouldn't have the doors open for you had you not had a doctorate and also a postdoctorate where I can prescribe. So that automatically just opens up so many opportunities and also a certain level of income as well. So it's very much this trade-off. And talk to me again in 2.5 years whenever I have successfully done public service loan forgiveness, and uh, I'll be absolutely on cloud nine. But nonetheless, a very big chunk of that private loans had to come back to me, and it's just continuing to remind myself that it's a trade-off. It has to be.
Yeah. And, definitely, Leah, we have to frame our reality the way it is. Like, okay, well, this is what it is, but what can I do to still navigate this. Just like you said, there are certain things and certain opportunities that would not have been afforded to you if you did not have this education. And so, just like you said, it's a trade-off.
Exactly. And literally reminding myself of that all the time.
Okay. And you can still achieve where you want to get to, even though you have those student loans. And so,
Yes.
one of the other things I like to talk about with you is that you are an expert on sleep, and you've worked with FBI. And so, usually when I think about FBI, I'm thinking about crimes, the takedowns. So originally when I read, I was like, okay, I was like, so does Leah like tell the FBI when criminals might be asleep? And then they can like creep up on them and like and take them down. But I don't think that's the case. So what exactly, what got you there, and what do you do with them, Leah?
Yeah, yeah. So I to go back in time, I had as part of your PhD, you have to do like a residency year. And so I matched at the Memphis VA Medical Center. And when you're on your final year before you graduate and you go out into the world and you work under your own license, you have to be as well-rounded as possible. So when I matched for my residency, I was on a lot of different rotations, working with a lot of different people who are struggling mentally with various different issues, working with different populations. And that is just so important. And, whenever you go to do that, right, like we have interns and we have postdocs who all need to have rotations and it all needs to work out in their schedule. And so one of the first days on residency year is we all go into a room, we have a whiteboard, and nobody comes out until everyone is relatively happy and has all of their requirements set.
Mm,
And so I had my heart set on a couple of different rotations that I really, really wanted, and the rest I was pretty flexible with. And because I was flexible, fate just so happened to put me on the sleep clinic.
mm,
And I really didn't think anything of it. I think, like most people, I probably thought that sleep was kind of boring. Like, who cares? We sleep every night, or we should
mm,
be. And while I was there, I just learned, and my eyes were open to all the ways in which people are struggling. And whether that's insomnia, whether that's nightmares, whether that's struggling with obstructive sleep apnea, or, all these other various different things. And so I had no idea how many people were struggling with sleep, but I was also in charge of doing lots and lots of sleep education and lectures at the VA, which I would constantly have people falling asleep on me
mm.
while I'm talking to them, while I'm trying to educate them about getting better sleep. And it just, that very short period of time really opened up my eyes to how much people are struggling, and how when you do improve their sleep, because that was my goal of being on that rotation, is working with people, whether that was groups or individuals, and getting them to a better place and getting them to sleep more hours each night, how incredibly that can change who they are, their personality, like all these various different aspects of their life, because sleep really does touch everything. And I think that I know that going into that rotation, that just wasn't something that I was aware of. And then leaving and graduating from the residency, and graduating with my PhD, my first real job was the FBI. I was hired as a full-time psychologist for the FBI. And when I got there, my supervisor had asked me, okay, Leah, so what's going to be your thing? And even though I was trained as a trauma psychologist and that was my specialty, normally when I tell people I'm a psychologist, like one of two different things happens. Either people ask me, hey, do you have a couple minutes? Can I tell you something?
Mm,
Or the other reaction, which is probably the more common reaction, is, oh, don't look at me. I need to walk away. Are you psychoanalyzing me? Are you going to write your dissertation on me? Like, those are like the two routes that the conversation often takes.
mm.
And so I kind of figured, okay, law enforcement, they're definitely going to be the ones who think, oh my gosh, I'm done talking to you.
All right.
And so I thought, you know what? As I'm talking to my supervisor and I'm, brand new to the bureau, I say, I just got off a sleep clinic rotation. So how about I help people with sleep? How about I do the education? I do one-on-ones. I help people that way. And that's how it all started. And I kind of did this like sneaky foot in the door thing of, I'm going to help you get better sleep. And then as you start to trust me, we're building this rapport. Eventually, I think that other things are going to come out, which is oftentimes unprocessed trauma. And that's exactly what happened. And it just kind of blossomed to a point where I was doing tons and tons of lectures all around the bureau as far as how to get better sleep. And I started to get tired of saying the same thing over and over and over again. So I decided to write it all down and put it in a book. And that's how we got to where we are today.
Okay. And that book is If Sleep Was a Drug, correct?
Yes,
All
if
right.
sleep were a drug, that is the book. It came out in October of 2025.
Well, first of all, congratulations on that. I will make sure to link to that down in the description of this episode so that individuals out there who want to go and check it out, they'll be able to easily find it. And by the way, I know that, so my wife she has a bachelor's in psychology. And I know
Okay.
sometimes that, even though she's not a psychologist, uh, even if she mentions that, people are like, oh, okay, are you trying to figure me out? And, and I know that's what they just said as far as like dissertations. But one other thing, now my wife has a bachelor's in psychology, but she has a PhD in naps. And so when I
Mm,
told my wife that we were going to have an interview, she said if she needs anyone for any sleep studies, let her know that I'm her lady. So I'm just passing the word. And my wife's like, hey, you know what? She's like black belt when it comes to those cat naps. So I just wanted to put it out there for you. So, so we've discussed, your kind of start, what you're currently doing with the FBI. But as said at the top, you are a member of the FI community, and one of the things we believe in is going hard.
mhm.
We're going to accumulate all of these investments so that we can retire early. But unfortunately, a lot of times we do things like sacrificing sleep because I know for a fact I was guilty of it. I recall at one particular point, I was doing very long days. I was probably doing 16-hour days, like in succession for a while. And I recall one day being in the shower and blacking out. I blacked out and I remember falling and I fell through the shower curtain and I nearly hit the toilet. It just so happened that somehow I was able to brace my fall. And I remember I broke the handle on the toilet and I nearly hit my head on the toilet. And why do I share that story? Because sleep, no matter what you do, is necessary. I used to think that they talk about, death and taxes. Well, sleep needs to be
Is
added.
one of those.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
let's kind of talk about. I saw the direct impact of just trying to go too hard for too long, has on head on me. So what can you share with the community of people who are really going hard, nose to the grindstone for these long extended amounts of time? What's the impact on the body?
Absolutely. I think that, being part of the fire community, like we're all hard chargers, right? Like
Mhm.
we want to be perfectionists. We want to be doing an excellent job. We want to go above and beyond. Like we want to make that money so we can put it away and retire as early as we possibly can. So I understand. And I think that it is when you're in this community and you see other people doing it, it motivates you to try to go even harder. And I think that as you saw in your particular circumstance, is that your body will only allow you to do that for so long. Like
Mm,
sleep will come whether you like it or not. And part of the problem I think is that we don't really have like an education on sleep, right? Like we don't no one ever like teaches us how to sleep or the importance of sleep. And when I say that sleep touches everything, I really genuinely truly do mean it. So if you're not sleeping well or you are sleeping very few hours every night because you are so busy working and trying to balance other demands of your life, your cognitive processing is going to take a hit. Obviously, that's one of the major ways in which you make money is having your thought processes in order and being able to make good decisions and having good judgment and being able to think through the pros and cons and also being creative. All
mm,
those things are going to take a hit. But we also need to think about like the physical body as well. So if you're someone who is recovering from an injury, sleep is when the body heals itself. It's when it is working on repairing all that micro wear and tear and damage that we're doing. So even if you're not recovering from something, but you're just, living your daily life and going about your daily life, that's the time in which the body makes its repairs and its updates, if you will.
mm,
So for folks who are not allowing that amount of time, that's going to be impacting the physical health. Um, One of my very favorite things, two of my very favorite things that I learned when I was at the sleep clinic. The first is whenever you are sleeping, or whenever you're specifically in deep sleep, your brain shrinks up and then cerebral spinal fluid comes from the spinal cord up and gives your brain a little like power wash. I used to call it
mm,
a brain wash. I don't call that anymore. I call it like a brain car wash. And this may not sound revelatory, but essentially when it's giving it a brain car wash, all the gunk and the junk and this misfolded proteins and stuff, the crap that's just like gumming up the works gets flushed out as waste and we remove it
mm,
from the body. And this may not seem, very interesting, but we can all relate to, if you live in a house, probably every Tuesday or whatever day, you put your garbage out on the side of the curb. And the waste management folks come and you don't really think anything about it. You just go pick up your can the next day and you bring it back to the house.
Mhm.
And this just happens like clockwork. But if something were to happen, say, for example, those waste management folks were to go on strike and they don't come and pick up your trash and it continues to pile up and pile up and pile up, well, we're going to start to have some issues.
Mhm.
And maybe it starts to smell, maybe it's attracting rodents or like small animals. It's going to start to cause health problems.
Mhm.
And we can very readily imagine what that would look like and how big of a problem that would be. But that's the same thing whenever we're not allowing ourselves to sleep an adequate amount of time every night, is that the gunk and the junk in our brain that needs to be cleaned out, and it should be cleaned out every night during deep, slow wave sleep, isn't getting swept away. It's not, the trash isn't getting taken out. And not to be a fearmonger, but for those of us who want to have a long life, which I imagine is everyone listening on this call
Mhm.
here, and everyone who wants to have not just a long lifespan, but a long health span. And for those who don't know what I'm talking about, it's not just how long you live, but it's the amount of time that you're spending in good health, right? You could live to be 100, but how many of those years may you be spending in a nursing home or bedbound or something along those lines? We want to have a long lifespan in which we are active and we are able to use our cognitive facilities. Like we want to have the best possible quality of life that we can. And so when I try to hit this point home and talk about this brain car wash and why it's so important is when we're not allowing our brain to do this night after night after night, we start to get this accumulation of these toxic byproducts essentially. And when they build up, and I want to be very clear about this when I say this, is I'm not saying cause, I'm saying there's an association because cause is a much stronger word. And when I
Mhm.
say this, I'll explain it more. But whenever we don't allow our brain to take out the trash every night and we kind of delay this process night after night after night, we start to have this buildup. And this buildup is associated with neurodegenerative disorders like Alzheimer's, like
Mhm.
dementia, like Parkinson's. And so the reason why I say associated rather than cause is because we also have other factors that come into play, right? Like, what are your genetics like? What's your family history like? What kind of food are you putting in your tank?
Mhm.
Do you exercise or have you never exercised in your whole life? Various different things that also play into that. But I think it's so important that we talk about cognitive health because when we think about sleep, oftentimes people think about turning off the light switch to go to bed. But I think they also think that the brain and the body kind of also go into this like airplane like hibernation mode and that really couldn't be further from the truth.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Leah. I know one of the things that there are two things that health-wise concern me. One is cancer, and the second thing is dementia and Alzheimer's. Actually, here in town, I work with this with the Mayo Clinic, like on this community outreach program around dementia and creating dementia-friendly communities. And one of the things that they talk about is that correlation that you spoke to, as far as like the lack of deep sleep and that power washing that you were talking about. Like, hey, you know what? And it really made me think of like, hey, I was like, how many scrubbings have I missed over the years? From just getting, for doing this. So it's concerning to me. So.
Exactly. And I have a lot of people who ask me, like, hey, I've come to your lecture. I heard you. You scared me. I want to make a change. Like, can I reverse what's already been done? And a lot of times, folks who ask me this question are usually prior military. So you can imagine a lot of sleep deprivation. And
Mhm.
sadly, the answer is that you can never recover the amount of sleep that has been lost over the lifetime. But the good news is that you can start now and you can start
Mhm.
prioritizing sleep now. And you will be able to gain those benefits as long as you are prioritizing sleep. But not to scare you, but whenever it comes to cancer and sleep are also very highly related too. Whenever it comes to inflammation in the body, we know that inflammation and cancer very much go hand in hand. And so that's one of the things that the body is working on during sleep is bringing down inflammation. But Also, again, I have a lot of folks who are in the first responder law enforcement world who are working shift work, meaning that they are working at night when the body should be sleeping. And what the research tells us is that when folks do this, if it's for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and beyond, um, the more time that you spend working nights, the greater likelihood is that you will develop cancer. And so
Mm,
there's a strong association between that too. So I don't know how many listeners are working shift work, but for those of you who are, shift work is a modifiable known carcinogen. And the reason why we call it modifiable is that you could potentially do something about this, right? You could ask for another shift, you could quit your job, you could get a day job. And so for those of you who are also concerned about cancer, cancer runs in your family, this is also going to be a very important point to consider because again, I think we can all agree that everyone wants the longest and most healthy health span that they can possibly achieve.
yeah, absolutely. One other thing I'll ask about this, Leah, because you've written a whole book, so I won't give too many spoilers. But this is my question: the art of the siesta.
Mm.
So I know a lot of times people are, hey, give me a little power nap and go to sleep. What? But I know I've never been one to really enjoy the naps, and a lot of times I find myself if I go to sleep it's usually an accident like during the day. If I wake up sometime I feel sometimes groggy and I don't even really feel any better than I did before I went to sleep. So is there a reason why like sometimes if you take a quick nap, you wake up you don't feel any more refreshed than you did before you went to sleep?
Yes. So what you're describing is called sleep inertia.
Mm,
And sleep inertia is whenever it doesn't happen always, but what you're describing is exactly what that is. So it's that groggy, foggy, what year is it kind of
hmm
feeling. And oftentimes people don't feel refreshed because that's what they're hoping for from a
hmm
nap is that they're going to wake up and they're going to feel so much more motivated and have a better attention span. And that doesn't always happen whenever it comes to naps. So that is called sleep inertia. And essentially what's happening is that your brain is trying to dip down into a deeper stage of sleep beyond just a light stage. And when that happens, and then when we wake up, whether that's through an alarm or typically through an alarm, that is kind of pulling us out from a deeper stage of sleep because when we sleep, and this is like part of a much larger conversation, we go through cycles. And people have probably heard these words of light sleep, deep sleep, REM sleep. We
hmm
cycle through these, and a typical full sleep cycle for an adult is usually between 50 to 90 minutes.
mm
Normally, naps aren't that long. Maybe they are for some folks, but typically they're not, right? Like you had said the word cat nap earlier. And normally that's what, like 10, 15-ish minutes,
hmm
but maybe it's a little bit longer. And so, what's happening with the sleep inertia? What we believe from the science is that you've gone from light sleep into a deeper stage of sleep. And when you're being woken up, it's from a much deeper stage of sleep rather than completing that sleep cycle, because that's really what the brain wants to do is complete the full sleep cycle. And because you're being pulled out from that deeper stage, that's why you kind of get that, like, oh my gosh, like, where am I? What year is it type of feeling.
Gotcha. All right. Well, that's good to know that I can put a name of what I've been experiencing every now and then. So,
Sleep
um,
inertia.
yes. And so one of the things that you make reference to is optimization. And we in the fact community, we like to optimize. And so your current book is If Sleep Were a Drug, The Science of Sleep Optimization and Biohacking Your Brain. So what can individuals expect when they grab your book?
Yes. So, first and foremost, I'll just preface it that it is written from the first responder lens because that's who I've spent my whole entire career with. However, everyone sleeps, and sleep still applies to regular folks. So, if you pick this book up, you'll notice that a lot of my examples might be nightmares of firefighters being trapped in a building. However, you can generalize that to whatever type of nightmare that you're experiencing. So, I just want to lay the foundation there for, even though it says first responder edition on it, that there is still so much benefit that can be gotten from the general layperson who's never been a first responder. So that's the first piece of it. Then I have the book broken down into a couple of different sections. So the first section is very, very educational, right? Like it is starting from ground zero as far as what is sleep? Why do we sleep? How does it work? Kind of what we talked about here, like sleep stages, what's happening in each of those? Why do we do that? And then what is happening in the brain and the body, various different things that are kind of like maintenance and updates that are happening throughout the night that are very important. So that's really the first portion of the book is really kind of diving deeply and explaining that of and setting up the story of like, why is sleep important? And then as we continue to move through the book, really, there's several other books out there on sleep and they're excellent. I've read most of them. But one of the things that I felt was really missing, and the reason why I decided to write my book, was that no one's actually telling you how to get better sleep. They might be talking about the research behind it and like all these really interesting stories and, oh, not FBI, NFL teams are hiring sleep specialists and this is how much more goals or whatever that they have achieved because of having a sleep specialist on staff. But it's not really telling you how to get better sleep. And that's what I did with this book, is that it's kind of like a troubleshooting manual of, if you can't fall asleep, here's what to do. If you're awake in the middle of the night, here's what to do. If you're struggling with nightmares or night terrors or you name it, here's what to do. And so it's really all about that. Whenever I do my lectures and talk to people about sleep, I tend to get a ton of questions about over the counter or prescription sleep aids. And I'm very lucky to also be a prescribing psychologist, meaning that I can write scripts for mental health medications. So there's a very long chapter, and I'll give you a spoiler. It's called There Is No Such Thing as a Magic Pill. And I do a very deep dive on over the counters and prescription sleep aids and just try and answer a lot of the questions that people might have whenever it comes to struggling with sleep and then just wanting to turn to a quick fix. So that's really what the book is all about, is just why sleep is so important, and specifically step by step how to get better sleep. And that's going to be behavioral modifications, it's going to be environmental modifications, so lots of different things that you can do to improve your sleep. And I think that it's very long. That's one of the things that I'll say. My editor had said to me, Leah, you have to stop. You have to stop writing. No one's going to buy this big of a book. But I really wanted it to be this troubleshooting manual where if you're struggling with something, you can read that particular chapter, you can put those things into practice. Hopefully, you put that book on your shelf, and maybe years later, when something else pops up and you're struggling with something else, or a friend or family member is, that you can dust off that book and you can, again, troubleshoot and go exactly to that chapter that you need to, and it will help you.
All right, that's great. So what we have is a comprehensive reference for
Yes.
several things that you might have. So that is that's great to know. And so definitely we want to make sure you go out there, and one of the things we believe in is taking care of the community. And so definitely we want to go out there and show Leah our support. One of the things I did notice about kind of your subject matter expertise, Leah, is around FMLA, and I never really thought about FMLA for mental health. I always think about, it's like, okay, we have a family member or someone that we need to take care of, but I didn't know it could almost be part of your own personal wellness. And so, is this an option for just individuals who are trying to do that? And then how can individuals navigate the conversations around FMLA while maintaining their professional standing and still have their financial security? What are your thoughts, or what is your approach around that?
Yeah, and this is something that, as a psychologist, I'm very lucky to kind of have a lot of behind the scenes knowledge about, what are the potential benefits, what are the programs that you can be a part of, because a part of my job is education and giving people knowledge and resources that they might not otherwise have. And FMLA, just like what you said, I think is well known. Maybe we don't know the name of it, but we know, oh yeah, so and so left to take several weeks off because they had a hip replacement,
Mhm.
or so and so is out because they're taking care of an elderly parent with Alzheimer's or a child with special needs. So we've seen people do this. We know that this exists, but oftentimes we think about it in those specific categories rather than thinking about it as something for mental health. And I think that when we start to educate people and let them know, especially people within the FIRE community, because we're such hard chargers and perfectionists and just kind of burning the candle at both ends, right? Like I'm definitely guilty of this at times too, is that our mental health starts to take a hit. And specifically, whenever it comes to FMLA for mental health, yes, you can 100% use FMLA for mental health. The specifier is that your issue around mental health, whatever that is, if it's anxiety, depression, burnout, trauma, whatever it is, that mental health issue has to prevent you or like significantly impair your ability to do one of your essential job functions. So that's really how we get to that. So I think that the the issue is that a lot of folks know that their mental health isn't doing well, and likely know that their mental health isn't doing well because of their job and just how stressful it is or how taxing it is or whatever the case may be. But a lot of people don't realize that if their mental health issues are impacting their ability to do their job, that can be a case for FMLA.
Mm,
And I think that there's a lot of stigma still around mental health and taking something like that, right? Like you would have no issue saying, "Oh yeah, I'm taking a couple weeks off because I'm having shoulder reconstruction." Yeah, you would have no qualms telling your coworkers about that. But I think that whenever it comes to even exploring FMLA and exploring it for a mental health concern, people get very clammed up about it and
mm,
tight-lipped and don't want to talk about it. And I think that part of my job as far as educating folks go is that when it comes to FMLA and asking your employer about it, the process would go going to HR, telling them that you're interested in FMLA regarding mental health, but you, by law, do not need to share very much information at all. You don't need to
mhm,
share a diagnosis. You don't need to share really there are so many protections. And as I was kind of just going and doing a deep dive at the very beginning of my journey with FMLA, is that there's so little information that your employer can actually have by law just because of the protections around it. So, to give you an example, the very standard form that the Department of Labor uses, and some other employers may have their own specific forms, but I also have it linked on fmlahelp.com. But if you check out that form, it's super basic. It's about 4 pages. One page is like all the demographic information for the employee. The second page is all the information about the employer, like what hours do you work? What are your essential job functions? Very basic. And then the last 2 pages are either for your physician, if this is a physical health problem, or for your psychologist, if this is a mental health concern. And essentially, there's nothing about notes. There's nothing about doctor's records. I don't even have to put a diagnosis. All I have to say is that your mental health issue or concern is preventing you from doing at least one essential job function. I need to talk about that a little bit, but otherwise, that's it.
oh wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think oftentimes individuals, like you said, it is that stigma behind, you know, saying that, okay, well, I'm not okay and I need to take a break, and also another tough part about it is that unfortunately, even when individuals are faced with that, if financially they're not in a good situation to be able to take that, step away from that, weekly or monthly income, that's a challenge for them as well. So they're like, okay, well, I can either make money and deal with the financial, I can either make money and deal with the stress mentally, or I can step away and try to get okay, but then I don't have the finances. So that brings on a whole nother challenge. So that's why it's really important for us to kind of make sure that we have our financial house in order when situations like this do occur. And if we get to a point where, okay, do need to take a wellness break by using FMLA as a tool, we're okay that it doesn't give us a financial hardship. So that's extremely important.
And I think an important aspect of it is too, is that FMLA is up to 12 weeks of unpaid leave. That's kind of like the traditional definition, but it doesn't have to be taken like that. If you don't need 12 weeks, that's why the definition is up to, or
Mhm.
you can take it intermittently, or you can take a reduced schedule. So there are ways that you can work around that without completely losing your income. There are, again, this is more like state by state dependent, depending upon where the individual is, of other types of benefits that may kick into place that may allow for some type of pay or partial pay while the person is kind of stepping away to take care of their mental health. But again, I'm very biased, right? I'm a
Mhm.
psychologist, so taking care of your mental health is going to be in your best interest, because if you want to continue to grind and work hard and work towards FI, you're going to need your mental health to be able to do that. And so this is kind of like a strategy to be able to step away. And what's beautiful about this is you have to, unless there are some type of like other performance concerns or concerns before you took the FMLA, that your employer has to hold your job for you. And that job that you're coming back to has to be either the exact same one or something very, very equivalent duties, equivalent benefits, equivalent pay. So it's a really nice option to be able to step away and have this mental restoration that a lot of people just don't have the luxury or think that they have the luxury of being able to do so. But one of the pitfalls that I often see is that, first of all, we have to be aware of what this even is. So great for those of us who are listening here and getting that knowledge. But then B, when they go to HR, they'll get the paperwork. And oftentimes HR will say, hey, you have 10 business days to go have this paperwork filled out and turn it back into us. And that is really where FMLA comes into play and helping folks, or excuse me, FMLAHelp.com comes into helping folks because a lot of people know that their mental health isn't doing well, but they don't have a psychologist because they know the problem is work.
Mm,
So they don't have someone to sign off on this. And if they don't, then they're trying to scramble to find someone who does. And as we know, unfortunately, just the mental health climate in today's day and age is very hard to just get in with someone. Oftentimes there's wait lists. And perhaps maybe if you see someone for the first time, they may or may not be open to signing that type of paperwork.
mm,
Alternatively, sometimes people ask their physician or their primary care provider to sign off on that. Sometimes they're okay with that, sometimes they're not, because mental health isn't necessarily their wheelhouse, it's really the physical body. So a
mm,
lot of folks kind of end up having this even more stressful experience of who am I going to be able to find to sign off on this paperwork? And that's where I've created this place, this one stop shop to be able to help folks who know that their mental health is struggling because of their job and it's impacting their ability to do their job. And so essentially, me and my team are able to meet with folks and have a virtual meeting and just really get a good understanding of what's happening for them. And then if it feels like an appropriate fit, signing off on that paperwork and having them being able to turn it into their employer within that very short time frame and meet that deadline.
mm. All right. I think that is great because, one of the things we try to do is to plan, not just for today, but, year, 2 years, 10 years into the future. And part of this approach is that, okay, well, I know, especially if I have a very small window, that 10 days isn't a whole lot. So it's
Mm-mm.
like, I almost think that, okay, if you're looking at using FMLA as a tool in your toolbox, maybe one of the first things you want to do is maybe go out, get an idea of, what you can do as far as like visiting fmlahelp.com, and that way you can see what it is. So then once you actually have that conversation with your employer and you on the clock, you already know, okay, well, this is the next place I need to go to as far as trying to get the appropriate paperwork done. Does that sound like a good approach, Leah?
Exactly, exactly. And I would say for those who are listening and thinking like, "Oh, I don't know if this is for me. I'm not sure. I'm on the fence." And not even you, maybe it's a loved one, maybe it's a coworker. And I have tried to build out a very nice blog and like Q&A and like frequently asked questions section because there's a lot of questions that come up with this as far as am I eligible? What about this? What about this? What about this really obscure situation? So I've tried to
Mm,
answer a lot of questions on the like education blog section of the website.
okay. And what, like someone told me at one point, you can't pour out of an empty cup. So we have to make sure
Exactly.
that, we are making sure that we are in a good state, not only mentally, but physically and emotionally. So I want to thank you for the time we've had here, Leah. As we close out here, how can the audience continue to connect with you and find out more around what you're doing?
Absolutely. So my website is drleahkaylor.com. I'm on LinkedIn. Definitely come and find me and friend me. I'm very active in Choose FI. I like to go to a lot of those local events and I've already signed up for Camp FI again for next year, and I'm actually going to be a
Woohoo!
speaker at one of the
Oh,
future
nice.
camps.
Mhm,
Yeah, so we haven't decided on which one yet, but keep your eyes peeled because I will be.
mhm.
And you can find fmlahelp.com. There's a ton of education and information there. And then also my book, If Sleep Were a Drug, is on Amazon, as well as other places where you can purchase books. And then there's also an audiobook copy of it as well.
Oh, nice. Are you reading the audiobook?
It is me.
Oh, wow. Okay, great. All right. I always like it when the actual author is one who's reading audiobooks, so that's great.
Me
So,
too.
in closing out, I want to thank you for being here with us, Leah. Definitely, let's go out and support Leah and what she's doing. Understand that FMLA is a tool that we can use. Also know that we are a community. So if you are part of the community, um, it's always great to have you. And if you're not a member of it, come on in. There's plenty of room. And so, with that being said, we want to get ready to close out here. I want to remind you, if you have not subscribed to us here on YouTube, please do, or follow us on your podcast platform of choice. And I am your host, Nick Johnson. As always, I want to remind you to trust the process. Have a great day.